Woohoo! Welcome to Unexplained Reality, the podcast about the strange and unexplained but real. We like to hear about and talk about Bigfoot and the Sasquatch. We call them boogers. We also like to talk about dogmen, UFOs, aliens, ghostesses, and pretty much anything that is strange, weird, and unexplained. We'd love to hear from you if you've had an experience or an encounter. You can get us on the email at unexplained.reality@yahoo.com. We got the Facebook, the Instagram, the Twitter. Heck, we even got one of them YouTube channels. Yeah, and we got the PayPal, and we got the Patreon. Woo, come and get you some.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Unexplained Reality with Brian Quinn and
Harrison Quinn.
Not very entertaining.
Good to be back.
Better. Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it sure has.
Pretty much, we apologize for that, but it's pretty much been my work that has prevented us from getting together, and we apologize. Hopefully we'll get back on the straight and narrow here and get back to getting out an episode every week.
Yep.
That's the plan, but I can't make any promises because you never know. But anyways, how's things going with you, buddy?
Pretty good. It's kind of boring school, you know, how things are.
Yeah, that's how it is. Realities of life.
Yep.
So you got any well, I guess we should go into our normal spill. If you have an experience or an encounter that you'd like to discuss or share, or just want somebody to talk to, it can be anonymous. You don't have to let us know who you are or give us any details about you. You can hit us at unexplained.reality@yahoo.com, and you can hit us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're have presence on all those different avenues. Come follow us, like us, whatever, and you can get updates when we have them, and just this is an option, a way to interact with us. We do have a Facebook group you can join, so you can just send us a request, we'll add you. We do ask if you listen to us on a podcatcher or iTunes or something where you can rate us or give us any feedback. We'd appreciate it. It just helps us to know what we're doing, what we're not doing, and it also helps others to find us and the subject matter that we cover if they're interested in that kind of thing. We have PayPal and Patreon. Patreon, I've never figured out. I haven't looked into that. Like I said, I haven't taken the time to figure that out, but I'm pretty sure it's not set up right. So if you want to donate to the show, you can catch us on paypal.com using unexplained.reality@yahoo.com. Other than that, I guess we can get into the news. You have anything?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I've got a couple from Cryptozoology News and Phantoms and Monsters. The first one is, I think I have a couple from each. The first one is from Cryptozoology News, and it is from Argentina. And it says a family encounters humanoid creature in Argentina. It says a family of 5 claims they encountered a humanoid creature in the southern area of the Patagonia province. The Argentinian family says they were camping in Porto Coag, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, when they had an unidentified noise caught their attention. It was about midnight, Monday, October 16th. We heard a continuous soft noise. It lasted for about 1 hour, said the father of 3 on MUFON. My kids who are into astronomy study in Buenos Aires, so we figured we'd go camp in a quiet area and observe the stars. An hour later, he adds, an electric blue light illuminated the western sky. It felt as though someone was lighting up the sky. We decided to go and check out the valley, thinking it could be coming from an oil field. The Argentinian man explains that as they reached the valley, a gray and big helicopter was flying over the blue light. The helicopter didn't have any lights on, but the blue light under it kept it visible. It was noiseless. The actual noise was coming from the valley. Suddenly, a humanoid figure reportedly came out of the valley and began walking toward the family. It was very tall. We initially thought it was human, but then we used the binoculars and realized it didn't have hands, or I guess nor feet. It was hovering over the ground. The man described the entity as having a long and thin neck, and it had an object wrapped around it, like a dark collar with a spinning light. When this thing put its arms up, we began running like crazy trying to reach the camping area. As soon as we arrived, we clumsily got everything in our backpacks, got in the van, and left at a high rate of speed. The eyewitness claims to snapped a few pictures of the incident with an adapter on the binoculars. There were not pictures posted on MUFON, though. So that's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
It's unusual. That falls into the peculiar range.
Yeah, it sure does.
So, next one is also from Cryptozoology News. It's called, the title is Arizona Man Spots Bigfoot in Mogollon Rim. It's from Strawberry, Arizona. A man in central Arizona says he saw a Bigfoot creature in the Coconino National Forest. The eyewitness claims he was camping in a USFS campground in the Mogollon Rim area when he spotted the alleged beast. I had finished reading a book when I looked across the campground and I noticed a very fast-moving dark figure heading from north to south, he said, about the June 26, 2016 encounter. The man goes on to say that he initially believed the figure was a large kid on a bicycle because it was moving too fast. Then he explains he realized that what he was looking at was something unusual. It was a very large Bigfoot. It only lasted about 3 seconds, but I was lucky to see it at all. The camper adds that the dark figure was about 125 yards from his viewpoint. Therefore, he was not able to identify facial details. It ran with a slight forward slant to its body. Its head did not bob up and down like a human runner's head at that speed. Its coat, he explained, was almost black with a slight reddish tint. The alleged sighting prompted an investigation by BFRO member Chuck Jacobs. Jacobs said that 9 days after the incident, the depressions in the grass were still at the sighting spot. It was not possible to get an accurate measurement of the foot size, but the length of the stride was clearly longer than what a human could achieve, said Jacobs. He added that they were able to estimate the height of the purported creature and set it at about 8 feet. That would be standing erect, he explained. Jacobs determined that figure couldn't have been a human being given the extremely large size of it. Additionally, he continued it moved faster than a human could run. The Mogollon monster, a bipedal creature many claim to be a type of Bigfoot, has been often reported roaming along the Mogollon Rim in central and eastern Arizona. And it's interesting because I've heard on plenty of other podcast sites as well as read articles and stuff in books that there have been, believe it or not, many sightings in Arizona of bipedal creatures that are described as basically like Bigfoot creatures. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of times it's in a arid environment, like a desert-like environment where you would not typically think that these live.
Yeah.
I mean, you would expect them to be living in a forested area, heavily forested, lots of big game, like deer and stuff that they can get their hands on to eat, and not in Arizona. But I know parts of, I guess, northern Arizona that are, forest and mountainous and stuff. So it's just something you don't put together. But the more and more we read about this subject and people's encounters, the more and more it's apparent that pretty much they're everywhere in the continental U.S. Maybe not in large numbers as in some areas, but it appears that people are having sightings everywhere at some point or another. Anyways, the next article I have here is from phantomsandmonsters.com, and it's a Bayou Mothman is the title of it. And it says, excuse me. Okay, in 1975, a few friends and myself were sitting around a fire near a canal. Across the canal was a very wooded area, and the woods were alive with sounds like crickets and cicadas and what have you. All of a sudden, everything went just stopped. No sound, nothing, and then we heard some type of thrashing coming through the woods towards the canal on the opposite bank. So this thing emerged. It was about 85 feet to 200 feet away from us. And what we saw was this, okay? Shows a picture of a red-eyed creature with wings. This is an artist's rendition of this. What I described it as back then was a Mothman. It was a humanoid shape. It had red eyes, and you could see a slight wing in the back of it, and it stood about 6.5 to 7 feet tall. Needless to say, it scared the poop out of us. I'll say it nicely. And we all ran, and we went and got shotguns and came back, and of course it was gone, and the woods had returned to normal. Just the normal sounds and all. This was the only time we saw it. I don't really know what it was. I just know it scared me, and when I described this thing to my parents, because it looked like a Mothman, and the reason why I say that, I don't know if it was the skin or the fur or whatever you want to call it. It was like a moth, rigid, like a moth's fur all over, and the thing that really stood out was the red eyes. He goes on to say, so when I found out recently with Richard Gere's movie, The Mothman Prophecies, the first time I actually heard anything similar to it. And then I started seeing programs on TV like The Unexplained, where they talked about a town up north. Oh, by the way, I'm here in Louisiana. But they were talking about a town up north that had seen it also. I guess they was talking about Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The way they portrayed it was kind of like you really think these people are nuts, but all I can tell you is this is what I saw. And you can add to all the other reports, so that's it. kind of funny response, but sounds like pretty much any other Mothman encounter. Something I wanted to note about that last one about from Arizona, the guy spotting the Bigfoot in the campground, was that I thought it was funny that he noted that it didn't, there was no head movement. It was running at a higher rate of speed, and it was very fluid. Like everybody sees these things run, they claim the same thing, that they just they kind of glide through the air, glide across the ground. That like their legs absorb all the ups and downs of the terrain. Whereas humans usually, when they're running, you're up and down. You're almost like bouncing as you run. So that's kind of weird. But it's interesting how everybody keeps saying the same thing. So just another reason I think that something's going on. People aren't all making it up. Alright, this one is from Phantoms and Monsters also, and it's a huge white-winged being in South Africa. It says, Hi, for years now I've kept silent about a sighting I have had, but after much research I simply cannot explain what it is I witnessed a few years ago. A little background on myself: I'm an avid bird watcher, and I am particularly fascinated with birds of prey and have read and owned many books on birds and have gone on many bird watching expeditions. It is safe to say that I did not mistake my sighting for any bird. I am also a qualified pilot, so I have also lent to judge distance and size of things in my environment. Time and place of the sightings: July 2010, around midnight in I think this is Doornpoort, Pretoria, South Africa. Doornpoort is on the northern outskirts of Pretoria. My house was less than a mile from Wonderboom Airport. To the north of the suburb is open fields with farms and platinum mines. I had not seen my brother in a while, and him and his wife came to visit me and my wife. As July is in the heart of winter in South Africa, we spent most of the time inside. As we both smoke and we don't smoke in our house, my brother and I went outside every time we wanted to smoke. At about midnight, we decided to go for our last smoke before going to bed. It was a clear, cloudless night, and there was sufficient moonlight, so the sky was bright. As we were sitting outside, something in the sky caught my attention. I looked up and saw a creature flying overhead. The thing that mostly caught me off guard was how white it was. It was so white it almost looked luminescent. It definitely had bat wings, and it flapped them very slowly. It was about 70 feet above the ground, and it had a wingspan of at least 10 feet, but I would say it was more between 12 and 14 feet. My brother also saw it. After it flew slowly overhead in a southerly direction, my brother and I just looked at each other, extinguished our cigarettes, and went inside. At first I thought it was some kind of fruit bat, but the only species I could find that was somewhat on the light color side that is found in the area was the straw colored fruit bat, but it is much smaller than the creature I saw, and I looked at a lot of videos of them flying since, and their wing beats are much faster than the beats of the creature we saw. Over time I've researched all manner of bats, and I cannot find anything that matches what I saw in color and size. It has been over 7 years, but I can still clearly recall what I saw and the fear I felt because of the sheer size of this thing. So that's weird. A Batman, a real Batman. Alright, and the last one I have here is Shadow Man confrontation near old train tracks. Says Forrest in Louisiana called in to tell of his strange Shadow Man experiences. This is coming from Phantoms and Monsters, like I said. It says, me and my wife, we were at our friend's house, and we were actually in middle school at the time, and they had this abandoned train. Well, he got married in middle school. Okay, maybe that's not what he meant. Me and my wife were at our friend's house, and we were actually in middle school at the time, and they had this abandoned train car on a train track that was just abandoned, rusted, sitting there. There were 3 cars in a row, and it come to a dead end on the track in the woods. We were all just playing on them and jumping in them and stuff. Well, I had peeked over, and I seen like this complete black shadow, and it was coming towards us, and I actually told them, and we jumped out of the car because we were all kind of freaked out about it. And as we were running a trail to get back to the house, it seemed like, it was walking just a normal pace, but it was catching up to us, and we got on the street. We climbed in the tree and tried to hide from it, and it was actually walking on the street. It looked like an old railroad hand, like a worker. He had like the hat on and everything, and he went behind this bush, and we were waiting for him to come around the other side, but he never did come. We waited for about 30 to 45 minutes, and we climbed out of the tree, And we walked that way, it was nowhere to be found. It was pretty crazy. So, sounds like they just saw a ghost to me, but anyways. You still there, buddy? Did you fall out on me? He gone. Hello. You have anything else to add?
Nope.
Alright, we're going to go into our episode here. Tonight we're going to talk about the sailing stones. If you haven't heard of them, maybe you have, I don't know, but they are a geological phenomena. There are two places that these occur, but basically what they are is they're these stones that have, they were witnessed by people that they realize that these stones move, but they've never been able to figure out why or how they're moving. And it's like anything people don't understand, they come up with some outlandish ideas of what is possibly going on with them, and this is no different. People have come up with all kinds of explanations from paranormal to weird physics or forces of nature or magnetism or I've even heard stories about people saying, oh, well, they believe leprechauns move these stones. Anyways, so basically you have these series of stones and they're in these desert areas and they mysteriously move and leave a trail. They've been witnessed and are known to be located in two different places. One is Little Bonnie Claire Playa in Nevada, and the other one is in Racetrack Playa in Death Valley National Park, which is in California. And you might be asking, what is a playa? Because I asked the same thing. It was like, besides somebody that is a playa. A playa is an arid area. An area of flat, dried up land, especially a desert basin, from which water evaporates quickly. So that's the official definition for what a playa is. Here, we had it wrong all these years. And Little Bonnie Claire Playa in Nevada is basically it's a ghost town located in Nye County, Nevada. The settlement is located on the edge of the Cercabadas Flat, adjacent to Nevada State Route 267. This is all from Wikipedia. The mines of Slate Ridge lie to the south of the town site, which is Bonnie Claire. And the Bonnie Claire Flats extend to the southwest between Slate Ridge and the Grapevines to the California border. The town had its beginning in 1906 to support gold mines in the Slate Ridge area. It replaced an earlier camp known as Thorpe's Wells, which had started in the 1880s to process the ore from Gold Mountain. When the Bullfrog Goldfield Railroad arrived in 1906, followed by the Las Vegas and Tonopah Railroad, business boomed and the site was renamed. However, after the mines played out, the town declined. After 1914, in the 1920s, the town became a supply point for the construction of Scotty's Castle, which is located in Death Valley, about 20 miles to the southwest. So geographically, these two places are located, within 20 miles of each other. The second place, as I said, is called Racetrack Playa. It's in Death Valley National Park. The Racetrack Playa, or the racetrack as it's called, is a scenic dry lake feature with the sailing stones, or moving stones, some people call them, what they leave like racetrack imprints in the earth there, and that's where the name came from. It is located above the northwestern side of Death Valley in Death Valley National Park, which is Inyo County, California, and of course it's in the United States. The racetrack is 3,714 feet above sea level and 2.8 miles long. by 1.3 miles wide. And it is exceptionally flat and level, with the northern end being about only 1.5 inches higher than the southern, which is amazing. Over 2.8 miles, there's only 1.5 inch deviation. Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
This occurrence is due to major influx of fine-grained sediment that accumulates at the north end. The highest point surrounding the racetrack is the 5,678 foot high Uhiba Peak, which rises 1,964 feet above the lake bed, 0.85 miles to the west. The play is in the small racetrack valley. It's an endorheic basin between the Cottonwood Mountains on the east and the Nelson Range to the west. During periods of heavy rain, water washes down from the racetrack mountain area, draining into the playa, forming a shallow, short-lived endorheic lake. And under the hot desert sun, the thin veneer of water quickly evaporates, leaving behind a surface layer of soft, slick mud. As the mud dries, it shrinks and cracks into a mosaic pattern of interlocking polygons. The shape of the shallow hydrocarbon lake Ontario Locus on Saturn's moon Titan has been compared to that of racetrack Playa. And that will come on later in our episode here. We'll talk more about that. The racetrack is dry for almost the entire year and has no vegetation. When dry, its surface is covered with small but firm hexagonal mud crack polygons that are typically 3 to 4 inches in diameter and about an inch thick. The polygons form in sets of 3 mud cracks at 120 degrees to each other. A few days after a precipitation event, small mud curls, otherwise known as cornflakes, form on the playa's surface. Absent of these indicates that wind or another object has scraped them away from the tiny mud curls, or scraped away the tiny mud curls. During the bimodal rain season, summer and especially winter, a shallow cover of water deposits a thin layer of fine mud on and between the polygons of racetrack. Heavier winter precipitation temporarily erases them until spring, when the dry conditions cause new mud cracks to form in the place of the old cracks. Sandblasting wind continually helps to round the edges of the exposed polygons. Annual precipitation is 3 to 4 inches, and ice cover can be 1 to 2.5 inches thick. Typically, only part of the playa will flood at any given time during the year. So that's a little bit about racetrack, which is primarily what we're going to focus our discussion on. So basically, you have these rocks, and some of them are small, 6 to 7 inches big, and they'll leave. Oh, and the stones are dolomite, typically dolomite and syenite, which are the 2 types of stones that are found in both of these locations. They'll leave tracks up to 100 meters long, which is 330 feet. Typically, the tracks are between 8 to 30 centimeters or 3 to 12 inches wide, depending on the size of the stone, and they're usually less than 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch deep. The moving stones range anywhere from 6 to 18 inches in diameter, so some of them can get kind of big. Some of them are up to 700 pounds. So we're not just talking about little pebbles,
Yeah.
And usually the rough bottom stones will leave a straight line. Their little furrow they leave behind them, whereas the smooth bottom stones tend to wander, which kind of makes sense. So the rough bottom, it has basically like a rudder that keeps it on course, and it's no different than a boat. If you have a rudder, it'll track straight. If you don't have a rudder, usually it goes all over. If you've ever been in a kayak, that doesn't have a rudder, that drops down, it gets kind of squirrely. It's like scooting across a sheet of ice on a bar of soap. It's just all over the place. So it's kind of the same effect here. Sometimes it's, the stones will turn over and leave different tracks or go in different directions. And it's weird because you have two stones that start at the same point. They might move together for a time, then either having might have a different direction change, or one of them might move ahead of the other. So there's no real rhyme or reason to a lot of the movements of these stones, and that's what's baffled people since they were discovered. And the first account of the sliding rocks was in 1915 by prospector Joseph Cook of Fallon, Nevada, and it was at Racetrack Playa in Death Valley. In 1948, geologists Jim McAllister and Alan Agnew, who had mapped the bedrock of Racetrack Playa, they published a report in Geologic Society of America Bulletin. Their article gave an overview of the sliding stones or sailing stones. In the article, they suggested the stones were moved by strong wind gusts. This caused a lot of controversy and searches for other such cases of the phenomena, and this was found in the location of Little Bonnie Claire Playa in Nye County, Nevada. And as you can imagine, this intrigued people, and people want to try to figure out what was going on and how these things were, these stones were moving and leaving these tracks, when it was pretty obvious that people weren't going out there, because it was they're out in the middle of these big open areas, and you can tell that the ground is not altered, that people haven't been stepping around, and so there's no footprints or nothing. You just have these stones out there, and their tracks they're leaving across the dirt. And like I said, some of them are fairly large in size. So in 1952, National Park Ranger Lewis G. Kirk documented his observations of the sailing stones. Specifically, he documented the length, width, and path of the furrows, or paths or ruts created by the moving stones. His investigation was meant to be very general. That is about the time when people started trying to figure out how this was happening. Many tried to hypothesize about what was causing these rocks to move. Some claimed it was supernatural in nature. Some believed it was just the wind causing the stones to move when the mud in the playa or flat was wet. However, some of these stones are rather large and weigh about as much as a person, and some of them weigh much more than a person. So it seems to be a little too heavy for the wind. Well, in 1955, George M. Stanley, a geologist, published a paper on the subject of sailing stones. He didn't believe the wind and wet mud approach to explain the phenomena because he felt some of the stones were too heavy. However, after studying ice flow around the stones, he felt that ice sheets around the stones either help to catch the wind, or that the ice flow is actually responsible for the movement of the stones. Well, that was not conclusive. So in May 1972, Bob Sharp and Dwight Carey started a program that would monitor the movement of the Racetrack Playa stones. They labeled and marked the location of 30 stones. They named each of the 30 stones and recorded any positional changes for the next 7 years. To test the ice flow hypothesis, they built a corral of sorts around the stones using rebar. If the ice flow helped catch the wind or cause the stone to move, the rebar should slow down the movement of the stone, or at least deflect it. Neither took place. The first winter, the stone moved 28 feet and just missed one of the rebar segments. There were also two larger stones also placed in the corral. One didn't move for 5 years, and when it did, it was basically in the same direction as the other one. The third stone didn't move at all during the study period. They concluded that if ice caused the movement, then it must be very small ice segments or collars around the stones. More recent studies by geologists have shown diverse wind speeds at the surface of Racetrack Playa. It is believed that even though wind gusts in the area might register at a certain speed due to the geography of the playa surrounding mountains, the wind speeds are significantly higher out on the playa. The wind pattern in that area typically flows from west to east, and that being the case, there are two narrow canyons that the wind flows down as it approaches the playa. The laws of fluid dynamics come into play, and whenever you choke down a liquid or a gas flow, you know what happens, right? It causes liquid or gas to flow out at a higher rate of speed. This is basically what happens at Racetrack Playa. The two narrow canyons are choking the wind which is flowing towards the playa, and when it comes out of these canyons and opens up to the playa, the wind is flowing significantly faster than when it arrived or approached the canyons. And so people are saying that that even though you have a 50-mile-an-hour gust outside the playa, on the playa that could be 100 miles an hour, just because of the choke down coming from the from the canyons. Well, this is all fine and good, but some of these rocks weigh over 700 pounds, as we said, and that is a substantial weight to be moving with wind, especially on a dirt surface. Even though the surface of the playa is sun-baked mud and doesn't have much give to it, it is still dirt, and a rock has a tendency to settle or somewhat sink into the dirt in relation to its weight. And also something to consider here is as wind blows and these rocks sit, if they're not moving, any little molecules or little grains of sand or dirt that blow are going to catch and collect all around the base of those rocks, so that's going to help prevent any movement, because it's going to basically over time make those rocks be deeper and deeper to the surface. But anyways, so some tests were done setting up various conditions using a wind tunnel. First, they tried to move various size rocks using just the wind on a dry surface, which was created comparable to the playa surface. The rocks did not move. Then they added water, because although the two playas in question, they are both in very dry and hot climates, basically deserts, they do receive minimal amounts of water during the year. Again, there was some minimal movement in the stones in the test, however not enough to explain the sailing stones. The final test was conducted where they added ice to the mix. So they had the stones in place, add water to the playa test bed, and then freeze the water. This test resulted in significant movement of the rocks and tracking left in the underlying mud surface. However, after some are claiming that this could not be the case, since the stones are known to move both during winter and summer. In summer, the lows at night average in the 90s, so there would be no chance of ice formation in those high temps. Then this guy named Ralph Lauren steps in, and he is a NASA scientist, and at the time he was investigating weather conditions on other planets. Because of the meteorological similarities between Death Valley and Ontario Locust, which is a vast hydrocarbon lake on one of Saturn's moons, he was studying Death Valley and became intrigued by the sailing stones. So he set up this little test using a Tupperware dish. And basically what he did is Lorenz set up a makeshift test to explain how the stones could glide across the playa at Death Valley. And what he did was to place a small rock in the dish and then filled the dish with about 1 inch of water. He then placed the dish in the freezer, and once the ice was frozen solid, he removed the container and had a stone sticking out of a sheet of ice, basically. He next took a larger container with water on top of a bed of sand. He placed the stone sticking out of the ice sheet in the larger container, and he was then able to move the stone relatively easy by just blowing on it. The ice created buoyancy and allowed the stone, the rock-ice combo to move easily, and the rock protruding out the bottom of the ice left a nice track or furrow in the sand bed underneath the water. So this test seemed to confirm or recreate what is happening with the sailing stones. However, as stated before, the stones are known to move both during winter and summer. So this kind of complicates the theory that Lorenz presented and tested, because there would not be enough ice, if any, during the summer to move the stones. So, yeah, could it be larger stones only move during winter when the theory could hold true? Or maybe only smaller stones move during summer and move when some moisture reaches the player floor? I mean, nobody really knows. I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they've been studying this, and maybe they know that, hey, these things only move, the big ones only move during the winter when there could be ice forming, and the small ones, theoretically could move just from really high wind, regardless if the dirt is very moist or got ice on it. I don't know. So I don't think anyone's going to know concretely, but there has been more things doing it. I think we know that leprechauns probably aren't doing it, and it's probably not aliens, which some believe, or some invisible force in the earth. But there was when I was researching this, I did find something that was published on August 27th, 2014, and it was actually on nps.gov, and it was about the saline stones in Death Valley. And it says, the title of the article is August 27th, 2014. It's kind of a blog entry. It says, "Mystery solved. Racetrack play is home to one of Death Valley's most enduring mysteries. Littered across the flat, dry surface of this dry lake, also called a playa, are hundreds of rocks, some weighing as much as 320 kilograms or 700 pounds, that seem to have been dragged across the ground, often leaving synchronized trails that can stretch for hundreds of meters. What powerful force could be moving them? Researchers have investigated this question since the 1940s, but no one has ever seen the process in action until now. In a new paper published in August 27th, PLOS One, a team led by Scripps Institution of Oceanography, University of California, San Diego, paleobiologist Richard Morris report on first-hand observations of the phenomenon. Because the stones can sit for a decade or more without moving, the researchers did not originally expect to see motion in person. Instead, they decided to monitor the rocks remotely by installing a high-resolution weather station capable of measuring gusts to 1 second intervals and fitting 15 rocks with custom-built, motion-activated GPS units. The Park Service could not let them use native rocks, so they brought in similar rocks from an outside source. The experiment was set up in winter of 2011 with permission of the National Park Service. Then, in what Ralph Lorenz, who's the guy that we were talking about before from NASA, of the Applied Physics Laboratory at the Johns Hopkins University, one of the paper's authors suspected would be the most boring experiment ever. They waited for something to happen. But in December 2013, Norris and co-author James Norris of Interwolf and Richard's cousin arrived in Death Valley to discover that the playa was covered with a shallow pond no more than 7 centimeters, 3 inches deep, shortly after the rocks began moving. Science sometimes has an element of luck, Richard Norris said. We expected to wait 5 or 10 years without anything moving, but only 2 years into the project, we just happened to be there at the night time to see it happen in person. Their observations show that moving the rocks requires a rare combination of events. First, the playa fills with water, which must be deep enough to allow formation of floating ice during cold winter nights, but shallow enough to expose rocks. As nighttime temperatures plummet, the pond freezes to form sheets of windowpane ice, which must be thin enough to move freely but thick enough to maintain strength. On sunny days, the ice begins to melt and break up into large floating panels, which light winds drive across the playa pool. The ice sheets shove rocks in front of them, and the moving stones leave trails in the soft mud bed below the pool surface. On December 21st, 2013, ice breakup happened just before noon with popping and cracking sounds coming from all over the frozen pond's surface, said Richard Norris. I said to Jim, this is it. These observations were surprising in light of previous models which had proposed hurricane force winds, dust devils, slick algal films, or thick sheets of ice as likely contributors to rock motion. Instead, rocks moved under light winds of about 3 to 5 meters per second or 10 miles per hour and were driven by ice less than 5 millimeters or a quarter inch thick, too thin to grip large rocks and lift them off the playa, which several papers had proposed as a mechanism to reduce friction. Further, the rocks moved only a few inches per second, a speed that is almost imperceptible at a distance and without stationary reference points. It's impossible that tourists have actually seen this happening without realizing it, said Jim Norris. It is really tough to gauge that a rock is in motion if all the rocks around it are also moving. Individual rocks remained in motion from anywhere for a few seconds to 16 minutes. In one event, the researchers observed that rocks 3 football fields apart began moving simultaneously and traveled over 60 meters or 200 feet before stopping. Rocks often move multiple times before reaching their final resting place. The researchers also observed rockless trails formed by grounding ice panels, features that the Park Service had previously suspected were the result of tourists stealing rocks. The last suspected movement was in 2006, and so rocks may move only about 1/millionth of the time, said Lawrence. There is also evidence that the frequency of rock movement, which seems to require cold nights to form ice, may have declined since the 1970s due to climate change. Richard and Jim Norris and co-author Gibray of Interwolf started studying the racetrack's moving rocks to solve the public mystery and set up the Slithering Stones Research Initiative to gauge a wide circle of friends in the effort. They needed to help to repeatedly visit the remote dry lake, quarry rocks for the GPS instrument stones, and design the custom-built instrumentation. Ralph Lawrence and Brian Jackson of the Department of Physics, Boise State University, in contrast, started working on the phenomena to study dust devils and other desert weather features that might have analogs to processes happening on other planets. What is striking about prior research on the racetrack is that almost everybody was doing work not to gain fame or fortune, but because it was such a neat problem, says Jim Norris. So is the mystery of slimy rocks finally solved? We documented 5 move events in the 2.5 months that pond existed, and some involved hundreds of rocks, says Richard Norris. So we have seen that even in Death Valley, famous for its heat, floating ice is a powerful force driving rock motion. But we have not seen the really big boys move out there. Does that work the same way? Death Valley National Park wants to remind people that racetrack is located in a remote area of the park, and road conditions are variable at best, requiring high clearance vehicles and heavy duty tires. So that basically, it's just, don't go out there and get yourself killed, because you get stuck out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So it kind of sounds like, they have figured out the mystery, but, they haven't seen the big ones move. So there's still that question, But that's pretty much the sailing stones and their history and what appears to be going on there. So you got anything you want to add to that, buddy?
Mm-mm.
You all good with it?
Yeah, I think you did a good job.
Thank you. So, I guess that's it for that one. Do you got anything going on? Anything you want to put out there?
Not really, no.
All right. I guess we can wrap this guy up.
Okay.
As we say every episode, if you have an experience or an encounter, it doesn't matter if you don't have to be on the show. If you just want somebody to talk to, we'll get something off your chest. we're here to listen. Unexplained.reality@yahoo.com is our email address. You can also hit us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. You can join that by just requesting to join the group. Twitter, Instagram, just hit us up. Come like us, follow us, and you can contact us that way. Send us private message or whatever, however you want to do it. We're on YouTube, so any of these, when we upload these, they go to the podcatchers, but the audio also goes to YouTube. We have PayPal, and if you want to contribute, we always could use that for paying for hosting costs and whatnot. I think that's about all I have. We want to thank Ricky Young Music for allowing us to use his music for our podcast, and we'd like to thank our favorite podcast because they were the inspiration for us starting our own show. Sasquatch Chronicles, Into the Fray, Radio, OK Talk, Mysterious Universe, Monster Among Us, Confessionals, Somewhere in the Skies, Secret Trans Podcast. What else?
I think you got them all.
You get them all. Cryptid Factor. There's always some I'm missing.
Make sure you guys go check out cryptidcrate.com.
Oh yeah, cryptidcrate.com. That's Derek Hayes' baby there. He does, if you don't know it, he does Monsters Among Us podcast. So you should check both of those out. Sasquatch is another one that I forgot. And the Grayling Report. So I think that's it. And if you don't have nothing else, buddy, we'll wrap this up.
Okay.
All right. Hope everybody has a good week. We'll catch you next time. See you, boy.
See you.
Tell us a story, Ranger Chat.
Oh, okay. I could tell you about the time I locked eyes with Sasquatch, or about my brush with the elusive Chupacabra. Then there was that encounter with the Mothman.
Yeah, tell us about the Mothman.
Of course, I once saw a lake monster and a sea monster on the same day.
Wow!
That's not even taking all the ghosts, aliens, and UFOs into account.
You've seen all that as a park ranger?
No, son. Those are the creatures I've encountered in my cryptid crate.
What's a cryptid crate?
Cryptid Crate is a monthly subscription box that arrives on your doorstep each and every month. It's filled with various cryptozoology and paranormal themed items such as t-shirts, hats, art, media, and other collectibles.
I want a cryptid crate. Yeah, I want one too.
You can get yours by visiting www.cryptidcrate.com. Sign up is quick and easy, and shipping is always free. I can't wait to get my Cryptid Crate, but for now, how about that story?
Spoiled like a child, and when she smiles, she shines like a sunflower. She's got beautiful eyes, and she uses those eyes like she's exercising some kind of superpower. Well, I knew from the first it was never gonna work, and it was gonna hurt. Still I said hello. And that dress she was in was so light and thin, like a whispering wind, and she looked so good in yellow. Oh, the days drifted by like the clouds in the sky, and it was summertime, and sometimes I still miss it. Yeah, I do. 'Cause she laid in my arms while I played my guitar on the hood of my car. She covered me with kisses. Oh, the love we made was a fiery race, look so good. And yellow